Hi, today on Catherine Learns Stuff, I'm going to walk you through how to make these beautiful black-eyed Susans. So let's jump in. So I was out for a walk the other day and I saw these really beautiful black-eyed Susans. And I thought, it's a shame that the season's over because I can't pick any. So I'm just going to make my own. And that's what I did. So if you would like to follow along with me and make your own black-eyed Susans, we can get started with that. So what I've done is on my website, Catherine Learns Stuff, I've got a shop. And if you go into the shop, you can actually get a copy of my SVG file by clicking in here and adding it to your cart. Once you've got that file downloaded into your onto your computer, you can import it into Cricut Design Space. Now I've already got it here on my desktop in Cricut Design Space. There's actually two different files. They're almost identical to each other, except the one here has score lines all over the flower and the petal, and the other one doesn't have that. The one without the score lines cuts out faster. The one with the score lines takes a little bit longer, but it also gives a little bit more detail to the flowers. So just some minor things that you need to be aware of when you're making either of these two files. You'll notice that each piece comes in grouped, and you'll notice that the width is 14 inches, which is a bit large, but we want to make sure that we're changing this to 7 inches for the design, and that's going to scale this down to be a more reasonable size, almost like a more realistic size of a black-eyed Susan. And the same concept goes for this one here. You need to scale that down to 7 inches. And then you want to make sure that you're ungrouping this flower arrangement so that each piece sort of cuts out individually. Now we're just going to focus on this one for 1 second here. We'll zoom in. We're going to focus a little bit on these score lines that we've got on these black-eyed Susans here and on these petals. Currently they're all set to cut lines, so if we go over to our layers panel here, you'll see that on this leaf here, you've got a basic cut for this score line, and the same thing for the next one. So what we want to do is we want to go through all these cut lines that are supposed to be score lines and select them and then change them from a basic cut to a score line. And we want to do that for all of the items. So for this flower, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I've got selected all of these score lines on my flower. Now Cricut sometimes likes to be tricky and not cooperate, so I'm going to select a bunch and change them to score, and I'm going to do this for the whole flower, so bear with me for a few moments while I change these to score lines. So now that I've gone ahead and made all of my cut lines into score lines, I can do a quick verification to make sure that all these are actually score lines, but I have a few more things to do before I'm able to make this. I'm going to ungroup this so that all these pieces are separate from themselves. And then I'm going to make sure that each leaf, I'm going to select each leaf individually, I'm going to attach it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the flowers so that the flowers are attached, and so that when I take them to cut them out, they're going to be with all the score lines in place. Now, the design that has no score lines doesn't need any work done with it. All that we needed to do was to ungroup it. So what we have here now, before we send this to make it, we want to just quickly review this. We've got 2 leaves, 2 petals pieces, and 2 brown inner stems. This is all for 1 flower, so if you want to make 2 flowers or 5 flowers, you're going to need to duplicate this 2 or 5 times depending on how many flowers that you would like. So we're going to go select make it, and then we're going to cut this out on our Cricuts, and we're going to see you at my workstation. For each flower that I've cut out, I have 2 sets of petals, I've got 2 leaves, and 2 inner circle bits. And I'm going to be using just a standard flower stem that I bought at the dollar store. When I made these designs, I've actually designed 2 different types of flower. One has, you can see here, it's got sort of score marks within it as I went through in the file details. I like the look of it. It gives it a little bit more life, but some of the files that I have, you can also do with no score lines. It cuts out faster, and if you're not super picky, the end result pretty much looks the same. That circle didn't fall out, but you can do with no score lines in the flower or with score lines, just to give it a little bit more depth. So the first thing that we need to do with each of the flowers is we're going to start off by rolling our middle stem or inner stem. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to just glue 2 pieces together so that it holds together nicely. And that's going to glue. I'm making 5 flowers, so I'm quickly going to glue all 5 of them together. but you can do one at a time or all at once. Now while these pieces are drying, I'm going to quickly assemble my flowers. Each flower has 2 pieces, so we kind of want to offset them a little bit or rotate them a little bit so they fill in the blanks in each spot and that we've got our center hole there. I'm just going to quickly add some glue in here and then glue them all together. Okay, so this glue here should be dry now for these pieces. So I need just an 1/8 of an inch dowel or smaller. And before I start using that, I'm going to quickly just fold all of these little bits in so that when I'm rolling, they're already facing inwards. And now I'm going to put this onto my dowel, and I'm going to do a little dab of glue right here so that when I'm gluing it, rolling it, it's going to glue itself shut. It'll keep it closed later for me. And just a dab of glue at the end there. And glue it shut. And now we repeat this on all of them. Okay. Now with this one, I forgot to bend the pieces before I rolled it. So you can see there's a little bit of a difference there. Let's put these down if they'll stand better. And you can see this was pre-bent, so it's all nice and tight. And this one's been opened before, so it hasn't been bent, so it looks a little bit open. But we can fix that once they've been dried up. Now that the center of our flowers are done, what we're going to do is we're going to work on our petals, on our leaves. So I've pre-scored these just to give them a little bit of a shape so that you can give them a little bit more depth and definition. So I'm just going to give them a little bit of a crease there and roll them with my fingers gently. And now again, I've done some with and some without creases so that you can have a bunch of different variations of this flower. So each leaf on the stem of the flower is going to kind of be like this. So I'm going to glue it on at the very bottom here and roll it onto my stem. Now the color that I have is a little bit off from my stem design, so my leaves are a little bit different color. That's okay. If I wanted to, I could have rolled the whole stem in a lighter shade of green, but for the purpose of this, I didn't really want to, but you could if you'd like, to give it all a symmetric color. And there's one. And I've designed it so each flower gets 2 leaves on it. And I'm just going to let it dry like that. Now while these stems are drying, I'm going to move them out of the way. And I've laid them flat like this to help them dry, but you can have the leaves in any direction, and you can add more per each leaf, per each stem if you'd like. Now we're going to go back to our flowers, which are dry, and each of these petals we're going to pull back because Lazy Susans kind of have their flowers going backwards. So I'm just going to pull them back, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the top level. If you've ever seen a lazy Susan, every once in a while they got a stem, a petal going in the wrong direction. So I'm gonna randomly just move some around so that they've got a little bit of a different look. So I'm gonna do that same thing for each of my 5 flowers. So our flowers are done, our petals are now done. Now while I have you here, you'll see that the flower with the score lines has a little bit more character to now to it, that we're putting it together, than the one without the score lines. So the last thing we need to do now is we're going to actually pop this flower through the hole of our stem, just like so. And now we're going to put a little bit of glue around here, and we're going to pop this bit onto our flower. Just like so. And we're going to repeat this for all of the flowers. Now this one here we forgot to fix, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squish these in with my fingers so that it kind of looks a little bit more closed. And you can pull some out. Now for this part you could use a glue gun. I'm just not a fan of the glue gun look right now, so I'm doing this. And there you have it, your Black Eyed Susans are done. I've listed all the products that I've used in the details below, as well as a link to my store where you can buy a copy of this SVG file. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this project. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.